morning, everyone. All right. Bob, can you let the words show? Thank you. Oh my God. I woke up this morning with a will not to do this talk. And by the time I'm finished, you may agree with me. Okay. Right. So, look, this is going to be a little bit of a trip. It's called Varieties of Will, but I seem to be combining it with the metaphysical origins of will. So, we'll see how far we get, and if I don't finish this, I'll finish it off tomorrow. So it's one thing to understand the will, but to get more specific about it, the specific directions, the creations, the sustainments, the destructions engineered by will, it's another thing. So what I'm going to do right now a little bit is to speak about my developing understanding of absolute will, and then name a number of types of will which are more familiar. And I suppose the most important thing which I'll say in the beginning is that eventually the type of will that you want to use and that you need in your life at this time should emerge. That's what we all need here. We're all trying to take a next step here, and you can't do it by just desiring it. You have to use an aspect of will to get from here to there, okay? So maybe some of this will emerge as we go along. And I would say that if we get nothing else out of this, let's consider it to be an experiment in building the antikarana towards the abstract mind using the philosophical method. There is a way to go straight, with visualization, and DK's given this, but I'm more trying to think my way into the abstract mind on a certain subject. And I will share this document with you in case you feel you have not extracted from it all that I intended, and between the hours of midnight and 2 a.m. you may study it. So anyway, I have more to refine here, but I'll begin the first half of this little thing. We'll be done talking about will, the arising of will in what I call the post-pralayic or pre-universal world. In other words, after the universe, before the universe. Endless series of them. So just kind of follow along with me, and if it, that's why I'm actually, I don't usually put stuff up on the screen, but I figured that to be able to see it and hear it at the same time might be useful, okay? So the absolute will, as I see it, is the firstborn of, or the first arising from absoluteness. Sometimes I don't even call it the absolute, I call it absoluteness, because I think it conveys more the idea. It's absolute homogeneity, there's no difference in it. It's absolute substantiality. The philosopher Spinoza, he called it substance, okay? So it's absolute substantiality than which there is nothing else, no thing else. So it's the firstborn. The will is the firstborn, in my view. Absolute will engineers the arising of the absolute deity, the absolutely infinite deity, which I am saying is something less than absoluteness, because it's identifiable. So I'm saying that in the post-pralayic world and in the pre-universal world, there arises, because of absolute will, the absolute deity, which is something less than absoluteness. Now, DK and everyone warns us, don't talk about this subject. Okay, but I'm a fool and I continue. All right. So this is, we can't really say anything about the absolute which is true, really, or untrue. I mean, you can't talk about it beyond the range of thought and everything, but I never learned, so here we go. So this absolute deity which arises is something less than absoluteness. And now I want to say that, in my view, anything enumerated is something less than absoluteness, just as number is less, and I would almost say infinitely less than no number. Maybe no number can be called the zero. So basically something arises in this absolute homogeneity, and we don't know how. This absoluteness is immutable without the mysterious stirring, which is the emergence of the absolute will. In any one of these sentences, you could spend a long time on them, just kind of, I'm trying to introduce myself and you to the abstract mind from a particular angle, part of the spiritual triad. There is no mutability within immutability without the absolute will. It's like the prime mover. It's responsible for all action. Somehow action arises in the actionless. Thus, the first arising within absoluteness is absolute will, I'm calling it that, which periodically, quote, engineers, sustains, and retracts the emergence of the absolute deity in all its articulated absolute infinitude. Absolute deity has the entire ultimate infinitude within it, absolute infinitude, but absoluteness does not. Absoluteness is non-articulated. You know what articulation means? It means a little piece of this, a piece of that, everything is divided into pieces and parts. That's articulation. One thing separate from another. In absoluteness, there is none of that. In the absolute deity, it's infinite articulation. All right, and then, no, we don't know, but I'm just making an attempt. This is followed, now this is in sort of a post-prolaic time, because the minute the will stirs, something that we call post-prolaic time arises. In absoluteness, there is no time. This is followed by the absolute deities. The first arising, the emergence of the absolute deity. Now, I'm using the idea of sequence here, and maybe I shouldn't because everything is superimposed, but that's the way the mind thinks. So this is followed by the absolute deity's will to self-perceive its own absolute infinitude. That the absolute deity is the only thing that can do that. It self-perceives. That's how everything gets started. The self-reflection of the absolute deity is absolute infinitude. That's an important statement. The self-reflection of the absolute deity is absolute infinitude. And when I say absolute infinitude, I mean there's just nothing else. Nothing you can think of is excluded from it, okay? This is followed, maybe I never should say that. This stage is then followed by the will to finitize through choice. Unless you have the will to finitize, you don't get a universe. And we've had endless of them. So this will to finitize creates universes. This is followed by the will to objectify that choice, which is equivalent to the will to go forth, and I like this phrase, into Mahamayavic exile. Do you feel like a Mahamayavic exile? I sometimes do. I wake up in the morning, I'm Mahamayavic exile. Anyway, so here we are in the exile of illusion, to go forth into Mahamayavic exile, or isolated, finite self-objectification as a universe. This is equivalent to the will to exist. Ex means out. You apparently exist outside of this absolute infinitude, but you don't really. It's just an illusion. But this is what seems to happen. Okay, we might ask whether in absoluteness must there be a will to be, or whether beingness forever is, needing no action, which originates absoluteness. And what I think about this is that we might say, and not way, but say, we might say that there is an infinitely recurrent periodical will to be existent in universe. That's what HPB calls the great breath. We might say that, but, with a big but, pure being or beingness or absoluteness is not willed. Now that's really important. There's no will behind that. Pure being or beingness or absolutely is not willed. It simply is. Beingness need not be sustained. It is absolutely self-sustaining. So nothing supports it. It just forever was, forever will be. It simply is. It's the absolute fact. It's the ultimate fact that, if you're going to assert a fact, that's it. Pure substance is the absolute fact. And by substance, I mean substance. I don't mean anything material. Okay, so we should not confuse the word being with existence. So, in this post-prolaic or pre-universal world of absoluteness, the will to be is not needed. Okay? You don't, in other words, this, whatever it is, this thing, it doesn't have to have a will to be, because it simply forever is, and there's no will to be behind it. Okay, but in universe, the will to be existent is needed and recurs infinitely. So, maybe, as the absolute deity, which arose out of absoluteness, self-perceives and chooses a finite self-objectification, which we call a universe, it's going to be a universe, that choice is engineered by the will of the absolute deity and is the will for that choice to exist in an apparently isolated, mahamayavically exiled manner in universe. Ponder on this. Okay, I will too. But the idea behind it is that a choice is made and that becomes the universe. Once the ray of the absolute brings the great choice, now, you know, infinite choices forever. It's really hard. Aristotle said that infinity was untraversable. Certainly sequentially it is, so it's a big mystery. You know, how do we even get here? If we got here by sequence, we never got here. This is a problem. Okay. Somehow we seem to be here, don't we? Okay. Anyway, so existence only occurs in universe and might be called mahamayavic, well, I mean illusion. That's what I mean by the mahamaya. Mahamayavic exile from absolute infinitude, of course, that exile is an illusion. The being of particulars begins to occur in the absolute deity's self-perception. Absoluteness has none of that. Absoluteness is ultimate homogeneity in which there are no particulars. From no number arises number, and in and as no number, there are no particulars. With the we're getting to the end of this part. Okay. With the establishment of the universal logos, that's the big God of the whole, any universe, with the establishment of the universal logos as the objectified precipitation of the ray of the absolute, the varieties of will begin to emerge. The universal logos further sustains, the will to exist in universe. The universal logos, which is the being that we are, what do you know? Okay. The universal logos itself is sustained by will of the absolute deity and by the fact that, as part of absolute infinitude, it has an imperishable foundation in absolute infinitude. So this universal logos is an inherent aspect, and its algorithm is inherent in absolute infinitude. The universal logos' will to be in universe sustains its existence or presence in universe, and it sustains all partialities or apparent divisions which emanate from it. You and I are apparent partialities. I don't know if you ever thought of yourself that way, but you know we are an appearing partiality. We're just a piece of it all, and yet we are the whole thing. Don't try to take notes, it's hopeless. Okay. The post-prolaic, pre-universal will to limitation, this is the only kind of will there ever is. This is an amazing thing, in my view anyway. The post-prolaic, pre-universal will to limitation of the absolute deity inaugurates and sustains the universal emanative process, and then the universal logos takes over. In other words, any movement at all is limitation. Any movement is limitation. That's what I'm saying. Okay. The in-universe, universal will to good, now that's beginning to sound familiar. Okay. Sustains the universal algorithm from the choice of the absolute deity before sending forth the ray of the absolute, which precipitated the universal logos, or which precipitated as the universal logos. We can ponder on that too. Universal logoic will, now we're in the universe, finally, is irresistible in universe. Whatever we, the absolute deity, choose will inevitably be in universe, or better, exist in universe. Universal logoic will carries forth the progressive self-objectification of the algorithm at the beginning. In other words, there's the grand design for every universe, and the will of the universal logos in universe carries it forth, and we're all part of that grand design. Every application of authentic will works towards the self-objectification of the universal algorithm at the beginning. In other words, will must be purposeful. This section is over. Well, okay, this is what I think about at night. And, it's pretty hopeless, really. But on the other hand, it all came from somewhere, and we're all very special in being non-special. We are all part of this absolute homogeneity. And I think what happens is that more and more we begin to see ourselves as the one universal substance. He said, DK said that Spinoza was part of the hierarchy, or, was a hierarchical member or something. Obviously an initiate of the third degree, at least something like that. And have any of you read The Ethics by Spinoza? Where he starts out with 6 definitions. It's fantastic. I don't think I've read it all the way through, but I certainly read the beginning and saw how he proceeded in a geometrical manner, trying to prove everything in a Euclidean manner. And he begins with universal substance, and he says God is a being absolutely infinite, infinitely infinite. Well, but that all sounds like it's way out there. I'm not going to read anything else today. See, that's for tomorrow. For tomorrow is going to be these varieties of will, such as will to be, will to synthesize, will to good, all these things. We'll try to get concrete about that. But up to this point, what we all have to realize is there is one substance, and regardless of the variety that you and I see in front of ourselves, everything is different, everything is, chaotic in this world of becoming, that one substance is the reality behind it all. That's the oneness, that's the all forms are alike in that they veil and hide the light, says DK, and are but externalizations of the one infinite being. That's who we are. Now, does that help at all, or do we just have to get on with our business of living every day and making the best of it? Yeah, we do. But there's something else about seeing, and I have a word for it, which I've forgotten. It'll come back to me. It's in my seed thought book, and it's somewhere hiding there in 10,000 seed thoughts. It's there, I know it. But there is this uniformity in variety, or diversity in identicality. That's what I call it, diversity in identicality. And I believe that as people who are progressing along the line of will and being, breaking one limitation after another, we have to begin to see both at the same time. You know what I mean? In other words, we can see variety really easily, and some mystics, they just go off totally into whatever they're calling this oneness and become useless in the 3 worlds of evolution, okay? But if we are occultists or students of occultism, we have to begin to learn to see. This is called isolated unity in a way, isn't it? We have to begin to see the identicality of all things, and as well their diversity as pure reason sees it. Now, pure reason gives you the ideal connection between all things. It shows you exactly what they are and how they're supposed to relate and all that kind of stuff. But where is the identicality while you're seeing all of the diversity? And that's what I'm working on. Sometimes I try to hold up any 2 things, and I just look at them and I say, well, I could work up some kind of causal relationship between this hand and this cup, and I could think about how they are related. But what I want to do is peel away the veils which prevent me from seeing them as the same thing. See, I want to see any 2 things as the same thing without destroying their qualitative nature, which has to work out in the world of illusion according to the divine plan and purpose. Is that clear? I'd be happy for one clear point to emerge this morning. Okay, so that's what I'm working on, and tomorrow I'm supposed to talk about the metaphysical origins of will. Well, I think I just did. Tomorrow I'll talk about the varieties of will. Today was the metaphysical origins of will. And remember that there is a mysterious first movement in the unmovable. You know, if a thing doesn't have parts, it doesn't move. See, where's the movement? Movement is relative, isn't it? It's relativity. You don't have movement without relativity, do you? So just suppose that you've got absolute homogeneity. You don't have movement. But somehow, mysteriously, number arises in no number. And the very first limitation occurs. And any action is a limitation. In other words, if you've got absolute infinitude and you've got this absolute homogeneity, then everything we've got here is like an infinite limitation on that. But we're enjoying it, you know, that's the point. I mean, that's it. What else is it? You know, why is all this taking place? We can't know, okay? But it's got to be bliss, it's got to be a dance, it's got to be a drama, it's got to be a play, it's got to be something which is artistic, is all I can say, you know. It's got to be for the joy of it, for the bliss of it, or for the necessity of it. I oftentimes call this thing, whatever it is, I call it the great contradiction, which can only continue to be itself by not being itself. Hence, illusion. Illusion is the seeming of things not being themselves. So in other words, if we've got this absolute continuity, which is the fount of all possibilities, the possibility that it is not itself has to occur. That's why we have a universe. But that's not enough. It's just a puny little mind of a human being trying to figure out where it all came from. Anyway, you're it. You notice how the thing went off, you know? Saw that, didn't you? Yeah, okay. So tomorrow I will deal a little bit with the varieties of will that we all think we are familiar with, okay? You know, will to be, will to synthesize, will to good, all those things that we think are more familiar. But that's it for this morning from me.